Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this video today. I am really excited to share this conversation with you all. A little while back, I had a chance to sit down with Bethany Nauert, Amy Bartlam, and Marisa Vitale, and we had a chance to just talk shop. We talked about the business of interior photography, and it was great because we all got a chance to share our own experiences, and we found that there were some things we did really different, some things that we did very similarly. And I've been a fan of all three of these ladies for quite a while. So personally, it was a great honor to get to sit down with all three of them at once and kind of pick their brains and talk about the business. We did ask our audiences before having this conversation if there were any particular questions that you guys had about the business of interior photography. And so we did have that list of questions handy, and we tried to go through as much as we could in the time that we had that evening. I think we actually covered a lot more ground than I thought we would, so we did get a lot of great information for you guys. We got so much actually that the conversation ran long and I had to divide it up into two videos. So, what you're about to watch is part one. At the very end of this video, you're going to see a link to go to part two. I highly recommend that you click on that link and watch the second part because it was juicy all the way through. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoy. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe or consider signing up to the newsletter from the Grove Studio so you get something in your inbox every single week. And thank you again for joining us on this video. I hope you like it. If you have any additional questions that you want answered, whether it's in a future conversation that gets recorded, in an article, in a newsletter, however I can manage to answer that question for you, please send those my way. You can leave it as comments in the video, you can DM me, you can email me. I am available. So without further ado, enjoy this recording. Don't forget to click on part two of the video so you can watch the whole conversation, and enjoy. I'll see you guys at the next video.
Hey, thanks everyone for tuning into our chat today. I'm Natalia Robert and I'm super excited. We have Bethany Nauert, Amy Bartlam, and Marisa Vitale, and we're just gonna talk shop. We got a bunch of questions from you guys of stuff that you would want to hear us talk about. So we're just gonna try to get to as much as we can and hopefully answer a bunch of your questions. Let's start with getting clients because that was a huge one for like pretty much everyone. Everyone's wondering about getting clients for interior photography. So I got this question from a lot of people who are in real estate photography and just want to transition to shooting interiors more for designers. And then some people who maybe already shoot a little bit for interiors, but they want to level up to bigger clients, bigger budgets, bigger scopes. So how did you guys get started working with designers and doing interiors? Who wants to jump in first?
We're all silent.
I don't mind going first. I'll go first.
Okay, go for it.
So when I was still living in England, which is where I'm from, I had a friend who was an interior designer. And so I hit her up and was like, hey, can I just shoot some of your stuff? Just like practice, get some portfolio stuff going. And so that's kind of how that sort of naturally started. Because once I sort of had her on my books, it was kind of like she would tell her interior designer friends and all that sort of thing. But then when I moved here, I didn't know anybody. So I was like really starting cold. So I went on, I think it was House, and just went through the thousands of designers that are in LA and picked out a bunch that I thought I really liked their work, or like seemed to be like at a similar stage career-wise as me, and sort of just reached out. And like the ones honestly whose work I liked the most and who I felt like we were probably in a similar place in life were the ones that I ended up working with. And then it all kind of like went from there.
Nice.
And I feel like word of mouth's the biggest thing from that point.
Absolutely.
Totally. I like that you mentioned that they were designers that seem to be at a similar level to you, because I think that's kind of important in the beginning too.
Yeah, I think totally. Like if you kind of obviously like shoot high, but it's just gonna be a much more like organic growth thing if you go for people that are at a similar point as you, I think.
Totally. Bethany, Marisa, how'd you guys get your foot in the door?
I feel like that's just exactly where you left off right there is like a good place for me to jump in because I actually started as a photographer. I did weddings and families. So I came from like a totally different scene. And because I have kids, I couldn't do it anymore. It was just, I didn't have like the energy to be shooting every weekend. And so this is kind of random. I mean, I had the idea that I wanted to do something that was like not with people. I needed like a break. And I went to do this like wedding workshop, and I met another photographer friend there, and she came to my house and she was like, wow, can I shoot your house or apartment therapy? So she did that. And then I was like, whoa, what is this world? Like this is what I'm looking for. And so she got me the job. She got me the in for apartment therapy. And for me, I really felt like I was like learning on the job. And apartment therapy was one of those things where nothing has to be perfect. They really want to see just how people live. So I didn't know that like, you're supposed to take like plugs away and like all that kind of stuff. And so it didn't pay very much, and like for me, it was fine because like I had no idea what I was doing. And so that's how I started. And really, I was able to just kind of like ramp up in my own way just by like learning on the job. And then from that, I got involved with a couple like women's groups in LA. And from those, just by saying I was like an interior photographer, designers from those groups found me just because I was in that group. And then they hired me. And then from there, it was just total word of mouth, apartment therapy. People see that and they hire you just from that. And then, the designers, they would just tell all of their friends.
Yeah, I had a similar kind of entry point to you because I was part of a co-working space for the first like 2 years of my business. And it was a co-working space that's, it's not only for women, but it's pretty much all women it's very like woman focused. And one of the other members in the space is a videographer who did a video for an interior designer. And so when she learned what kind of photography I was focusing on, she was like, oh, you got to meet this designer. She's a great person. You'd get along. And she was in a similar place as I was kind of early on in her career. And so it was a great fit. And she's still a great client of mine. We're actually good friends. So that's, the getting out and talking to people and then the referral is huge.
I think networking is really, really big when it comes to like starting a business, is just getting familiar and getting in front of as many people as you can,
Yeah.
I think like the helpful part with interiors also is I noticed this even coming from weddings is that for interiors, it gets put out there on the internet, and then it's tagged by like the products that are in the photos. And it gets shared by so many people that doesn't happen in the wedding world. So that gives you a chance to get your name out there in so much of like a wider circle, than you can just by your own self.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the advantage of interior photography is that it kind of ends up like advertising for you in a way.
I think that's so true. Like, I think in a similar way, like probably when you were doing your apartment therapy stuff, I like was working with Home Polish and they had such a huge Instagram following. It was like that just inadvertently my work was just exposed to so many more people than I ever could have targeted myself.
Did you see a boost from that? Like whenever your stuff would get published, did you see a boost in
100%.
like designers wanting to work with you?
I did, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, definitely. It was like a massive, it's sort of like an endorsement, isn't it? It's like, I suppose in a weird way, like it's kind of like old school word of mouth. It's like being recommended by somebody.
Yeah.
But it's Instagram.
The new old way.
Yeah. Although I do think that people value word of mouth more than ever before because of things like Instagram. So, I mean, I certainly do with just like, anything, restaurants, whatever, but I think it's the same for us. It's like people just really value that, not having to sift through the tens of thousands of photographers to choose from.
Well, it goes back to just like having a strong reputation and a strong work ethic if you're known for delivering quality work and being
Yeah.
pleasant to work with, and
Yeah.
you know, you have a good reputation just in the business or whatnot, then people are going to pass your name around, and you're more likely to be like, oh, I trust Amy, so I'm probably going to hire them, you know, because Amy
Right.
suggested them,
Right.
Yeah.
versus anybody else who you might have heard about, but you don't know, have anyone who has any direct experience with them.
Yeah.
Totally. The apartment therapy and home polish kind of way to get in. I love that, but that feels very LA specific.
That's true.
Because you guys are all in the LA area, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what
But
would you?
apartment therapy is all over.
Is it?
Apartment therapy was my gateway too, though. I mean, honestly, I would never have shot interiors had it not been for them either.
Mhm.
Really?
They're the gateway
Yeah, we
drug.
haven't heard your story, Bethany.
Oh, it's very similar. I was still working a full-time job, and I randomly got hired by this guy to do some photo work on his blog. And then he's like, oh, my girlfriend just started writing for apartment therapy, and she's looking to have pictures taken. And at the time, this was in 2008 or 9, and like all the bloggers that were writing for it was still very small. It's definitely like it's a whole media brand now, the site. But before, like when it was still relatively, still growing and everything, I think that this writer that I was working with was the only one that was getting an actual photographer to shoot content. But I had never shot interiors before. So yeah. And then, I mean, really, really pretty quickly, like, it's the same thing. Like pretty quickly, I think just like by word of mouth, like people are like, oh, this so-and-so shot my house. And they would recommend them to their interior design friend who had a shop. And so then I would go and get work by like shooting somebody's store, or when I was writing for apartment therapy, I also was not just doing home tours. I was also doing store reviews and just writing about design and stuff like that. So I was constantly like looking for people like, hey, do you want to be featured? It was a great way to honestly to like build my portfolio, is to offer people free press. And
I know that
Everybody wants that press.
Yeah. I mean, and to this
Yeah.
day, like whenever apartment therapy features anything with my photos in it and I'm tagged, or, I'm tagged on Instagram or whatever, like anytime I get a lot of hits to my website, I get a lot of hits to Instagram. So my name, my stuff's like on Pinterest a lot. So it's good. I'm very grateful to them. Yeah. Do you still shoot for them, Marisa? Sometimes, yeah.
Because I love it. I love those shoots. It's not how you're gonna make your living.
No.
But it's always interesting people. Maybe it's just LA, I don't know, but it's just always makers and really creative, interesting people. And so I don't know, for my soul, I kind of like
I know I do miss it sometimes. I felt like I was like putting a lot of work into it, which is, I mean, regardless of like if you're have a very high budget or no budget at all, you should still like give the same amount of attention and love and work ethic. I totally believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the reach that it has, they're a great site to be featured on. I don't know. I think our editors stopped reaching out to me. Maybe she just assumed I didn't want to do it anymore or something.
Is it the kind of thing where once you kind of are in that, you're in that rotation, then they just reach out whenever they have a new property that they want to feature?
Yes. Even now and again, like our editor will reach out and she'll hit Marisa and then Jess, our other friend Jess, who's not on here today. Usually Jess is in here, so we'll say a virtual hello to her. They'll reach out and be like, oh, we have these, this so-and-so family with this really cool house. Does anybody want it? And she'll kind of put it up for grabs for us to see if one of us wants to go shoot it.
I feel like that changed also, whereas like in the beginning, I was shooting a lot of houses because I could find them myself. So that was like kind of fun. Like I was able to research interesting people or just cool houses that I wanted to shoot. And and then that just became not so easy to do. Yeah, it's just kind of changed. Yeah, they choose the houses now.
Well, also I think it's also when as apartment therapy has grown so much over the last 10 years, there's also been a huge growth in like in shelter focused and design websites altogether. So it's very competitive now, you know. Maybe they don't want to be featured in AT because they're holding out for Domino, you know, or whatever it is. So it's a lot more competitive, where I think like quite a few years ago, like it was probably like it was more narrow, you know.
Yeah, they were like the first, weren't they, really? Apartment therapy. Yeah.
So
Yeah. If I'm getting this right, the creator of apartment therapy started the blog when he was still married and they had just had a newborn, and he was just blogging about his about how to like make living work in a tiny little studio apartment, I think in New York City. So he's grown it from there. Really grassroots.
Yeah, so different.
Yeah.
So is it still the kind of thing where if somebody wanted to find a place and submit it, are they still open to that kind of stuff?
Yeah, they take submissions all the time still. Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So networking. Bethany, you mentioned networking, but it's kind of different right now. Like we can't really go anywhere. Like any events and stuff that I would normally try to be part of just aren't happening. Are you guys doing anything that is networking-ish during this time?
It's a hard no from me.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like it's so funny because at the beginning of the year, I, always anticipate like January and February being really slow. So at the beginning of the year, I was like, what can I do this year to boost my business? And, one of my goals was like, I'm just going to get on some, public PR people's lists. So I like did a bunch of research and tried to find all these PR companies that deal specifically in home and design. Maybe they have relationships with interior design magazines. So I knew I wanted to reach out to them. And then I also just kind of made like a master list of like the different production companies I'd want to work with, different agencies I might want to be represented by, different brands that I was interested in working with. And I just started, honestly, I put together like a kind of like a press pack thing of my experience and some of my work. And I just blindly wrote out emails. And to me, that's been like the number one way of, getting new work this year and getting as much of that outreach done that you wouldn't really do at like any of these social events. And I was never really honestly that good at going to a lot of social events anyway. So
they're always so awkward.
I would always go, but then end up just talking to the people I already knew.
Me too.
I'm such a wallflower. I go and I maybe talk to one or two people, and then I just kind of shuffle back to my car and I'm like, okay, I'm done. But I try.
It always comes out of those though. Like even if I feel like I didn't talk to anybody, something later will be like, oh, so-and-so saw you there. And like,
do you know what? That's so true. I don't think anything bad can come of being at those things. And I think something that I was trying to do when I first moved here, because I didn't know anybody, was really try and like put myself out there loads and like trying to rush it almost. And actually the stuff that really has been meaningful that came out of that period of time was the genuine friendships I made, and like the designers that maybe I didn't work with straight away, but we ended up going to events together or like, making relationships. And then from that point on, they would send me work with other people or, all that sort of thing.
I found that too. It just seems like when you're doing anything with interiors, it's so relationship heavy that it's kind of slow. It has to be a little slow and organic. That's how it's been for me too. And I kind of love that, but it can be frustrating when you just want clients in the door. I started trying the email thing. I kind of gave it sort of like a half-assed effort last year. But that's one of my things for 2021 is I want to do kind of like a more structured email campaign where I follow up and I make sure I see who I reached out to and whether they replied, and like keep following up with them every once in a while. I've heard other photographers in architecture and interior that had really good success from just sending emails and sending sample work and stuff like that.
And I think more of like knowing who you're pitching to and like really doing your research is going to get you probably the most attention. If it looks like a cold email that you're just like cutting and pasting a name into, then they're going to know, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think also if you are sending any kind of like press package or like you know, if you're doing it, even if you're sending them like a digital link or whatever, it's not just your website, but a separate thing from your website. If it looks like it's geared towards whoever's receiving it, they'll know, versus them being like, why are you sending me pictures of houses when, you know, all we do is, you know, car commercials, you know?
Yeah.
There's a photographer who I know was doing like an email campaign, and he actually made a unique link on his website, like a unique page, and sent them the link specifically for them. And so he could see if they went to that page, because they were the only person that had that link.
That's
And
smart.
he tailored that page on his website. It was a hidden page, so he tailored it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think he had like a little thank you note or something on there and some sample galleries. I thought that was really brilliant.
How many pages did he have to make there? That's like a lot.
From what he mentioned of his like whole effort, it was pretty detailed.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was pretty elaborate. So,
but
yeah.
honestly though, that's what's gonna like sell you to your
It will.
future client. They're gonna appreciate the effort. They're gonna appreciate the,
Absolutely.
you know.
It
Totally.
100% will. Like, so many of my clients tell me they get emails from photographers all the time, just cold calling. So you have to find a way to stand out, whether it's how you speak to them or whether you know, pick stuff out of their website that you like personally and talk about that, rather than just pushing your stuff on them. It's like to make a kind of start a conversation, I think.
Have you guys ever sent print material to them, like actual physical mail?
I haven't.
No, I haven't either.
Oh, I used to, but I think everything's digital these days. I
Yeah.
mean, I, at one point, right before graduating college and right after I got a job at the same agency, I worked at a photo rep agency called Art and Commerce. They're huge. They're like really big in New York. They represent a bunch of very, they had like Annie Leibovitz at one point. They have a lot of fashion photographers. And I think it's beautiful to have something to hold in your hand. And I think you can really see like craftsmanship and the effort and, you know, the intention behind what the photographer's trying to deliver by sending something in the mail. It's kind of a lost art at this point. I mean, even a handhold portfolio, it's like, we don't see that. It's like you look at somebody's social media, you look at their website and you can get a sense of them, right? You can look at their LinkedIn or whatever. And I think it's so nice to have something to hold in your hand. But I just remember, okay, this was back in 2002, working at this agency. They would literally get stacks and stacks and stacks of promos. And half the time they just go right to the trash.
I wonder if now that's like a way to stand out, because no one's doing that, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
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 So I agree. I miss seeing print.
Yeah.
I know. So nice to have that really good quality cardstock in your hand. Feels so good.
I mean, I hardly even use my business cards anymore.
I know. I have so many
for them, and I'm like,
yeah,
no,
just ran out.
I rummage through my purse. I'm like, I think I have one. Let me find one. Hold on. It's all like dirty and Scott.
I have like a drawer full of them, but I never have them on me.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what anyone would do with a business card anyway.
So let's talk about pricing, because once you get the clients and you got to figure out what you're going to charge them. And that's like a huge topic too. I get questions all the time. And I think when we put the feelers out for this, a bunch of people were asking like, how do you even price yourself? How did you guys figure that out? Because there's like no information out there on the internet about how to price yourself for this.
No, I think at the very beginning, I can't remember if I was doing hourly or if it was per project. I think I was charging per project and making up numbers, and quickly learned that I wasn't really being accurately compensated. And it was like, oh, it's my time that's important, so you should charge for your time. So that kind of like, I think it's sort of all part of the learning curve, but I am 100% behind being paid for either by the hour or the half day or the full day or whatever it ends up being. But like, your time is the most important thing that's covered, because then people value your time. And then, you know, that makes a better working experience anyway.
So how do you structure your prices? Do you do half day, full day right now, or do you do hourly?
I do a half day and a full day, and for new clients, I have been doing just a full day, but which is the other thing actually that I should say is that I think somebody asked me on Instagram about when to put your rates up and how to deal with demand and things like that. And I was like, well, you know, I think
You mean how to increase your rates?
Yeah, like how to know when is the time. And I think the fact that she was asking that means it's time. But I think the thing to do that cautiously is to just increase your rate for new clients. So you're not sort of burning relationships with existing clients, but you are testing the waters with a new rate, and also doing it incrementally, slowly.
And then eventually like
putting your rates up.
And then do you eventually bring the existing clients up to the new rates, or do you just kind of keep them lagging behind because they were older clients?
There's a bit of sort of catch up, sort of, you know, that sort of process. But also I think having different rates for different types of clients too. I mean, I know it's like a little bit different with interiors because it tends to be your clients are all quite sort of like similar size wise, but you will have some who are just, it's one designer, or you'll have someone who's like a firm with 15 designers. So I think it's worth having different rates for those different types of clients for sure.
Totally.
And sort of like remembering who you want to work with when you're pricing. So, you know, having a rate that's a little bit lower for people that you really want to work with and build relationships with. And if someone reaches out who's a big firm and you're sort of like, well, maybe then, you know, put your rate up a little bit and see what happens. I think it's all about kind of feeling your way a little bit, really.
I agree. I think it's not a one size fits all answer.
No.
And it also, I want to say on one hand, I think it depends on your level of experience, but at the same time, I think Amy makes a really good point. Like, maybe you've only been shooting for 2 years, but you could still price, you could, in my opinion, and this depends on how you look at it, but in my opinion, even if you have less experience than the person next door, it doesn't mean that you should devalue your own work quality.
100%.
Like you still could deliver just as high end or better than somebody who has 10 times the experience. So you have to, I think, you know, when you're price out for, you know, have your goal client in mind, right?
Yeah.
And then also consider for everything else, your time and all your post-production and all your equipment and but it really is not a one size fits all answer in my opinion, because I think that every client's needs are different. There's commercial rates and then there's small business rates. There's a team of 15 versus a team of 1. You know, some clients, it's like they're shooting strictly for social media. They're not shooting for print and web and advertising, and they don't have a million partnerships.
Yeah, I remember that, Bethany, about you mentioning that to me a little while ago about how you have a form on your website. I don't know if you still do that, where you have people fill out what the purpose of the images is and where they're going to go, where they want to use them. And I think that's so clever, because then you know going into something really what the expectations are, and you can kind of price out even based on that.
Yeah, I created that form because I found that every email inquiry I was getting was answering the same questions. Well, how soon do you want this done? What's it going to be your turnaround time? How many images are you looking for in the end? You know, I used to have a question on there that's like, what's your budget? But now I'm like, I'm not going to ask that. Like, I feel like some people, it's too intimidating. So that's like the next question. Well, do you have a budget in mind? You know, and then I'll know if we're the right fit. Or, you know, now I have an agency that I just kind of usher everything to her, but it does help my agent get a sense of like, okay, what is this potential new client's like expectations? What are they expecting of me? You know? So.
And I do think actually that like I've personally like benefit so much from our little group of interior photographers, because then we're able to know where we sit within our market and sort of all kind of end up in the same sort of zone, and sort of I think that's really helpful. So I do think if you're starting out, it's a really useful thing to make friendships with other interior photographers and be able to share that kind of thing, because otherwise you are just on your own in the dark, just kind of hoping for the best.
Totally. That's how I was when I started. And I think my very first rates, I started with what I had picked up doing like some portrait stuff. And I'm like, well, I can start packages and like around that rate. And you just kind of, it's trial and error. You just kind of figure out this is too low, this is too high. It's not packaged the right way or structured this way or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was a total stab in the dark in the beginning.
Yeah.
Total.
I did hear an interesting things. A client told me once that they'd heard from somebody else, so I can't take credit, but they were saying sort of come up with a number that you think is a reasonable annual income, or like covers your bills and your rent or whatever, or what do you want to make a year, and then figure out how much you want to work, like how many hours you want to work. So then work that out and divide the one by the other, and then you get an hourly rate from that, and then see how you go pitching yourself at that rate. And that's kind of like working backwards, but really that's what you should be earning, isn't it?
That's so funny. That's how I figured out my day rate, as I figured out how much money do I want to make per hour. Because as you guys all know, like sometimes you'll go and they'll only need you for like an hour or two.
Yeah.
And they don't want to pay for a full day.
The only thing with that is if you're starting out, you don't know how long you're going to take, or you might take way longer in the beginning than you do once you kind of learn the ropes.
Well, that's where it benefits you to just charge
by the hour.
An hour. Well, no, I was going to say in that case, if you don't know how long it's going to take, you just charge them by the half day or the full day. Like, hey, you have me for a block of 4 hours or a block of 8, or
and 10. Like time yourself for editing, like see realistically, like actual numbers, how long it takes you, because for so long I didn't have any idea how long it was taking me. I knew it felt like a long time, but I had no idea. And then as soon as I worked it out, I was like, oh, that's why I'm busy all the time and don't have much money. It's like I need to compensate for the time that you're editing as well, which sometimes clients don't realize could be 2 or 3 times longer than the actual shoot itself.
That's where all the work is, really.
Oh yeah, that's like 75% of the job. A quarter of it is shooting, and then the post-production.
I know. I can't stand when people are like, "Oh, you charge this much, but it's only 4 hours, so you get $200 an hour," and I'm like, like if you divide it properly, there's all the work I do after the shoot.
You're like, I pretty much am making nothing actually. Hold on, I need to reassess.
I had a client say to me once, she was like, oh, you earn more than I do. And I was like, I don't think I do. Like, if you're basing that on my shoot rate, then fine. But I'm not shooting 8 hours a day every day.
Yeah. Marisa, what do you do for your pricing structure? How do you have it set up?
Mine is so funky because I don't shoot just interiors also. So that really got me in trouble, just in my own mind, of just trying to figure out pricing for all different types of clients. Because I shoot products, I'll shoot lifestyle, I'll shoot like some travel stuff. And that was crazy. So just trying to do all of that. And honestly, like I didn't really get down my interiors pat until these ladies like really helped me. That was so helpful to just talk to other people, and because it's helpful for all of us to be on the same page as well. So for clients, when they're like, asking other photographers, because I'm sure it's like super annoying for them too. They're like, what? Like they're getting rates from like all over the place, from different photographers. So it helps us. It helps everybody, like, in the industry, if we're all kind of like on the same page. But I have a lot more clients because I have kids. Like I can't, it's hard for me to do like a full day. That's so rare for me. So mine are usually half day, and some of them are even less than half day. So some clients I'll do hourly rates for them. And it works for me because I only have these little windows.
So when you do, I was gonna say, so when you do an hourly, for example, do you work in, like, say you charge $300 an hour, is that already calculating that you're going to do X number of hours for each hour of shoot? You're going to do X amount of time editing. You're already working that into that rate, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Not that I ever really know, because it's just some jobs are easy and some are not, editing wise.
Well, that's another thing. Some jobs, it's like, for whatever reason, there's like no recovery time on getting polished images finished, and then depending on whatever is needed in the retouching, you could be seriously spending like an hour on one photo, and then other times it's like 2 hours to breeze through like 20 photos. So
and you don't know till you get started. You don't always know when you're shooting it even. It might take,
so hard. With pricing, that's the hard part, is that you just don't, it's not always the same.
So do you guys also, another thing we get asked about a lot is usage. Do you guys work in different types of usage to your rates? Do you have like tiers for that? Or is it just kind of like one flat, you can use it across all media, or you can use it everything but this, or what? How do you guys break that down?
Amy's so good at this.
Amy,
We always are like, Amy, what do you do for She's like, got it really, really just your
I want to hear now.
contract is really good.
I don't feel like I do, but I love that you think that. I don't know, I just have like digital usage, like online and digital usage and print usage. Those are like my two separate categories. Although, sorry, to reverse it a little bit, when I'm shooting with an interior design client, I always give permissions to them for, to promote their work. So they have like pretty good coverage for their usage, but it's the third party usage that maybe I'm a little bit more hardcore about. So that's where I have like the digital use and the print use separation. That's for third parties. And yeah, I had somebody write a contract for me. I had a lawyer do it. So I have a template ready to go. I think that's the thing that's been crucial for me with knowing how to deal with those types of things, is just having a system. So I have the license agreement, I have it all written out. I can just pop that in an email and be like, okay, this is the deal. And just I think the more you do that as well, the more you just get used to it and you kind of get confident with what you're doing with that. I think a lot of people are kind of a bit like, oh, I don't know, like, which we all feel like, but I think just sticking to a system will only benefit you in the long run with that, and especially if you're working with a lot of the same people again and again with licensing.
And I think being upfront and asking them like, well, how do you plan to use these images? Like, you got to find out right away,
Yeah.
Like, even though they're shooting something and their intention is maybe to like just try to get it published in a magazine and then put it on Instagram. Well, they don't know. What if it gets a lot of attention and then somebody wants to use it for an advertisement?
Yeah, you've got to have a conversation before they book, for sure.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of times we are their teachers, like the clients don't even know. They're like, what's licensing? And like, what do you mean? And so it's a lot of education on our side,
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I was going to say, I feel like it's important for us to know what we're talking about, because I didn't know what I was talking about for a long time. Yeah.
None of us did.
And they're relying on us to tell them. And we're like, but I don't know. And
But it's interesting you say that as well, because I think a lot of, I don't know, say like vendors or whoever want to use your images will contact the designer rather than the photographer.
Right.
So this is why it's so important to have like a conversation about it with your client, because innocently you will lose track of your pictures if you don't have that conversation.
Yeah, and I feel like in the beginning, when something like that would happen, it would be like, oh yeah, sure, please. Yes, please use my photos. My name can get out there,
Yeah, that's tricky.
I think also there needs to be like definitive language and understanding like who actually owns the rights to the photos. Like, you as a photographer, it's still your image. You're, though they're paying you for your time and for you to produce images of their design, like technically you're licensing to them, unless they want to discuss like 100% full rights, full usage. And I think that there's a very common misunderstanding, because, they are spending their good hard-earned money to hire you to photograph their design, but there still needs to be an understanding of like what exactly it is they're paying for.
Yeah.
Well, and I've heard, I know that there are a number of photographers who, when they kind of lay out their pricing, they say, it's X amount for the full day rate, and that includes the licensing of X number of photos. And so that's a way for them to sort of bring up the idea that they're not paying to buy the photos, they're paying to license these many photos from you. Or when they do like a per photo rate, they'll say, you have your creative fee, and then you're paying X amount to license each image. Which I kind of like, because it's such a huge issue, and it's such a big gray area for designers.
It really is.
Yeah, I like that, because that brings the verbiage, like it just is out there from the get-go. Yeah, I think that's really clever.
Well, right, and like you were saying, Amy, when we've all talked about this before, I think it's a very common that, you know, we'll shoot for a designer. The designer possibly has a lot of partnerships or whatever involved in their project, and they've promised all these people pictures.
Yeah.
And then the pictures just end up, you know, whereas I at least try to write into my contracts, like, you know, any third party, it needs to come through me.
Yeah.
You know,
but I've had that even after, you know, even after a contract has been signed and initials at every single line. I've had it after the fact where you find out like, oh, I'm splitting it with the builder and he's using the pictures, and you're like, wait a minute, that's a third party. Like,
yeah,
it's almost like sometimes even having it black and white in your contract doesn't, you know, guarantee that anyone's reading it.
I feel like it needs to be like an actual voice conversation. Like it needs to be a phone call, because I mean, I talk about the licensing or the third party use when I quote in the contract, in the invoice, and still there are situations where it's used by third parties and I have to be like, wait a minute, I don't want to be the bad guy here, but
and unfortunately I think a lot of people just sign contracts and they don't really read them.
Of course, I do that. Agree.
Totally. Too much to read. Yes.
I don't know what I give Apple permission for. I just hit agree.
Oh,
Nobody does. Nobody does.
No.
Not one person. It's so complicated, isn't it? I mean, it is. But so again, that's why it's so helpful to have friends that are in the same world.
That's another thing. When you're starting out in photography, I think build your network. You know, like if you want to do fashion,
so crucial.
Get to know other fashion photographers. If you want to do interiors, get to know other interior photographers. It's so helpful just to like get an understanding of what you're doing.
And it's so much easier to do that with social media. You can just kind of DM somebody and just start a conversation, and it's so much easier than like I started in 2011, 2012, and Instagram just wasn't really a thing yet. It wasn't really like what it is now.
And I see a lot of photographers that are shooting real estate, but they want to shoot more for interior design. And I think that there are some definitive differences there, which is that like real estate's a really fast turnaround. It usually doesn't have a huge budget. It's usually not interior design focused. It's more about like the whole room or the layout of the house. You know, a lot of times it's,
well, and the usage is totally different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Do you guys monitor the third parties using your photos on like Instagram too? Like if somebody reposts something that your designer posted, like one of the companies that
really
was
keep track of that.
Do you guys track that at all? Do you kind of just not?
It's hard to police.
It is.
Yeah.
Maybe we all need to hire someone to do
yeah. You know, in the past, I've been like, oh, that's cool. It ended up in this article. Cool. Like, I had no idea they were going to pitch it to that magazine, but I'm grateful to be in it, you know, things like that. That's happened a lot, actually. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think something that actually is another really good conversation to have with your client is having each other's back when it comes to that, because there will be a lot of reposting from their account versus your account, and, you know, making sure that you're tagged in the caption above the fold, tagged as well, so that you're giving, you know, that the designer is giving you the best chance at finding that trail, but also like saying to your client, I'm going to do the same for you, because I do that for my clients. If people share my photos and tag me and don't tag the designer, I'm on there straight away. Please credit the designer. It's so-and-so, and I'll tag them. And it's sort of like you can kind of help each other out with that. Like if you have that dialogue with your clients, which I think helps.
It's different if you're tagged like on the photo versus in the caption, right?
Yeah. I mean, being tagged in the image, I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like being tagged doesn't do an awful lot, because if someone's just reposting it, they're not looking at that.
And also like a lot of times the designers or whoever's posting it will be tagging like
loads.
50 minute tags. So it's like, well, who's the photographer? Unless you're gonna go through every single person tag.
And they like stack on top of each other too. They stack all these tags, and like you can't see who's in there.
No. Oh, and unless you have photographer in your handle as well, then no one's going to know when they see your name that you're even the photographer. True. You're just somebody tagged in the post. So yeah, I mean, I think
proper credit with the word photography by.
Yes.
That's so annoying.
Above the hashtag.
It's so annoying.
Ugh. Like, I'm over it now, but there was a good like 2 years. It was just like, oh, it made me so angry. I just felt like I had to police people so much. You know, I was like,
But
so much
that's a
time.
really good point. Like, you kind of have to, like, I feel the same way, but it's like you have to like educate people, but you also have to like try and not get mad about it, which is
Right.
hard for me to say.
Hard.
But it's gonna happen. It
Yeah.
will, no matter how hard we try.
Totally.
So I think like you kind of have to make a little bit of peace with it, a little bit, but also do your best to track it down. I mean, I'm chasing people down.
Yeah.
Or I was for a while anyway.
I am too. I'll be really annoying. I'll be like, excuse me, so glad you love this picture. Can you say that I'm
I know there's so many things to think about on Instagram, and it's so hard.
Yeah.
For me, it kind of depends on my mood too. Like if I'm in
Yeah.
a good mood, I'll be really nice. And if I'm in a bad mood, I'll be like, hey, hi, I saw this. Thanks.
Hey,
Bye.
hi.
Yeah. Oh, I'm like British passive aggressive. I'm like, thanks so much for sharing. Can you please? Yeah. Thank you so much. Credit me.
I'm like, now that we're even talking about this, I remember that, like, you know, on your phone, how it saves like your most used little like icon things or whatever. It was like the little police. It's like on there.
I think it annoys me more when it's people that already have, if we're talking about Instagram specifically, if it's somebody that already has like a ginormous Instagram following, like they know how valuable being edited properly is.
Totally.
It's like, why do you have to, you know, and then it's not even educating them anymore, it's policing them about it.
Exactly.
And then you just feel like a jerk, you know?
Yeah.